Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
We are learning Mishna Gittin, Perek Dalet, Chapter 4, Mishnah 5. Okay. Mi shechetzei eved v'chetzei ben chayrin. A person who is half slave, half free man. How did that happen? How could it be half a slave? How could it be half slave, half free man? Yeah, how does that happen? So the explanation is that this slave was owned by partners. It was up to two people owned him, and then one person freed his half. Meaning each one owes half the slave, and one of them gave the slave a document of freedom, freeing him from being a slave to him, but the other one didn't. So he's half free man, half slave. Okay, says the Mishnah, what do you do? He works. He works for his master one day, for himself another day, the other day. That means is that, so he does work, right? Who gets it? The master, the master or him. He's half free, half slave. So the way the Mishnah phrases it is, one day you work for the master, and one day you work for yourself. In essence, as they bring here, in fact, the half slave and his master are partners in all of the half slave's income. Like, well, what's this? One day this way, one day that way. At the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, so now the partnership, instead of the partnership of two masters, there's one master and him. They're partners. They're partners in whatever he does. Nonetheless, the sage, however, decreed that it be divided by giving one day's income to the master and the next day's income to the slave. That was a practical kind of thing that the Chachamim instituted to keep it clean, to keep it even. And that, in that sense, it's not necessarily even. If you think about it, right? What if one day he makes a lot, another day he makes a little, right? It's not even then. Nonetheless, I guess in order to keep this clean as possible, the Chachamim said, one day him, one day for yourself. Okay, Divrei Beis Hillel, these are the words of Beis Hillel. Amr lahem Beis Shammai. So Beis Shammai, the house of Shammai, the academy of Shammai, the scholars of the academy of Shammai said back to Beis Hillel, to the house of Hillel, Tikantam is Rabbi, okay, you fix things up for his master, but for himself, you haven't fixed up anything. Meaning, monetarily, okay, there's a monetary factor here. Who owns the work? All right, you found a solution to that. One day himself, one day the master. So the master, for his ownership of half, it's been taken care of. But you have not fixed up the situation for the slave, for the person himself, for the half free man himself. Why is that? Because he's got a personal problem. He cannot marry a maidservant, because he is half free man. The halacha is that a free man may not marry a shivcha kanainis, a slave woman, and a free woman may not marry a slave. So that's a prohibition in the Torah. So now Beis Shammai say, look, he can't he can't marry a maidservant because it's not possible. He's half free man. The half free man of himself is not allowed to be married to the slave woman. He can't marry a free woman because he's still half slave. And the fact that he is half slave says that he can't marry a free woman. So he can't get married. No, yibatal. So what should he do? Sit around, do nothing? Well, that's not going to help, because that's an interesting point. Yibatal, what should he do? Sit around, do nothing, meaning not be able to not have children? The world was created for the purposes of being fruitful and multiplying. Shenema, as the pasuk says, he did not, meaning Hashem did not create the world to be deserted. He formed it to be inhabited. Now you'll notice, so the point of argument to say that we need to find a way for him to reproduce is based on this pasuk, which is a pasuk in the book of Yeshaya, the book of Isaiah, that Hashem didn't create the world to be void, but rather to inhabit it. Why didn't the Mishnah bring the pasuk of the Torah of that Hashem said, Pru or Avu, Meluas Haaretz, be fruitful and multiply? Why didn't the Mishnah mention that pasuk? So the answer they bring down here is because mentioning pru or vu, that's the mitzvah. The mitzvah of reproducing is pru or vu. The slave doesn't have that mitzvah. So therefore, you can't say, well, because of the mitzvah pru or vu. Now again, from his free half, it does, but from his slave half, it doesn't. But the answer is there's another source. There's another mitzvah of sorts that says to reproduce. It's not a commandment of the Torah, but it's as the pasuk says, that's what Hashem wants the world to be. And therefore, that's not happening if he can't marry. But rather, again, for the benefit of society, which really means for the benefit of him and for the purpose of what Hashem wants from the world. We force his master, meaning the one who owns half of him. We force him, and he makes him a free man. And now that he's a free man completely, he can marry a free woman. Nonetheless, but the servant, the slave, has to write an IOU for half his value. Meaning, if we're going to force the master to make him free so that he can marry, the master can't lose out because of that. And therefore, the slave, the former servant, has to take upon himself to pay what he lost, which was half the value of him as a slave, because that's what he owned. So that's what it means. You force the master and you make him into a free man. And then he, the former slave, is going to have to, or former half slave, is going to write a document, meaning an IOU, for half his value. So that's Beis Shammai's argument. So far we had in the Mishnah, Beis Hillel said, Beis Hillel made no mention about how to deal with his ability to marry. Didn't say anything about forcing the master to have to go ahead and free him. Beis Hillel said, one day master, one day yourself. That's how you work. But he made no mentioning about the issue about how is he going to reproduce. Beis Shammai said, okay, monetarily you have a solution. But what are you going to do for him? He can't marry anybody. Therefore, Beis Shammai say what you got to do is we force the master to free him, and the former slave, the former slave has to pay him back for the loss that he had to do for this, which was the fact of him the value of him being half slave. The Chazru Beis Hillel l'hayris k'divrei Shammai, and then Beis Hillel changed their minds to follow the words of Beis Shammai. Meaning, in the Mishnah says Beis Hillel heard Beis Shammai's argument, and therefore at the end they actually they changed their minds and they follow Beis Shammai, that we don't do this thing about working one day for the master, one day for himself. Rather, the master has to go and free him, and the servant has to then go and write a IOU for half his value, because that is what the master who owned half of him lost out. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.